Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our monthly series, Diplomat Diaries. And this month we have His Excellency Kenneth Nóbrega with us, Ambassador of Brazil to India. And this is a very interesting, of course, Brazil is always interesting, but at the moment we have had a new government, President Lula coming in with new priorities. And we have had the G20 Presidency in particular also being, the baton being handed over to Brazil. So in some ways, Brazil is occupying a very interesting position in the global order to articulate not only its ideas about the world, but also how perhaps as emerging economies, developing countries, India and Brazil, can work together in different platforms, including BRICS, where the two, Brazil and India, continue to work, and also IPSA, which is less talked about, but we have seen some recent engagement there as well. So we will start by the ambassador laying out some of his ideas about Brazil's foreign policy, India-Brazil relations, and then we will open up for a broader interaction with everyone involved. So, Ambassador, over to you.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you also, as we have talked, for the wiggle room you gave me regarding my initial intervention. Of course, when you talk about foreign policy, it's very ample. So just to kickstart our exchange of ideas, I would like to focus, as an ambassador who has arrived 4 months ago here, and because also Brazil has just assumed the presidency of the G20, so I was just proposing to start our exchange with these two themes, and then of course we can expand our exchange. So my idea is to take some 10 minutes, 12 minutes here, and then I think it's okay with you. Right. So I think I'm just making some remarks on our bilateral relations with India. Of course, starting with some recalling a bit of the history of our diplomatic relations, but really to focus just to recall where are we coming from, but concentrating on the outlook, on the future. So just a few facts, I think, well known to you, so I will go through quickly. Of course, this year we are celebrating 75 years of diplomatic relations, and throughout these 7 decades, we have had a bilateral relation characterized by a consistent coordination in multilateral fora, based on shared values, common interests, and perhaps a fundamental overarching common goal we have been striving together was to promote a more democratic and inclusive world order, which would ensure that developing countries can have regulatory space, the so-called policy space, to carry on their national projects of economic and social developments in an autonomous way. In other words, we always resisted, I think, the idea of being only rule takers, and also rule takers in a number of areas: geopolitical, social, commercial, environmental areas in general. And also, I think we always refused to define our foreign policies in relation to conflicts and interests which were not fundamentally ours. Basically, I'm quick personal note. I served as a Brazilian delegate many years in multilateral fora, and one of the first things a Brazilian diplomat did when he arrived in a diplomatic multilateral assignment was to contact his Indian colleague, because the coordination was very, very fluid on an everyday basis. And so I think that when you talk about the coordination multilateral forum, it's not just political discourse. It is a reality, I would say. In just recalling also in the first decade of this century, our coordination went further because we became parts of coordination groups, as you mentioned, first IPSA, then there was BRICS, G4 focused on Security Council reform, and BASIC, a coordination group, of course, in the climate negotiations. We launched a strategic partnership, as you recall, in 2006, or already during the President Lula's first tenure. Just a small observation here, because until 2006, until Lula himself convinced himself that we should launch a strategic partnership, relations between Brazil and India from the Brazilian side was really administered by Foreign Relations, Ministry of Foreign Relations. This was our turf. And then when Lula arrived, he got more of an interest in foreign policy, and the strategic partnership with India, IPSA, was already something that decided not only inside the walls of foreign relations, but in the, I would say, presidential palace. So then the relationship took another level in the sense of intensifying day-to-day contacts. And just now, fast forwarding to 2023, in his third mandate, President Lula and Prime Minister Modi met in September at the sidelines of the G20 summit, and they had a substantial meeting, and a joint statement was issued at that time. And we say, and in a nutshell, what we can say is that that joint statement kind of relaunched the strategic, or re-energized the strategic partnership, and also based on our historical tradition of coordination, but also projecting or envisioning a relation which would go beyond the political realm or the multilateral fora stage, which to encompass economic, energy, investment, defense, other areas of the bilateral relations. And what I would say that, as a matter of fact, this broader partnership encompassing more areas has been already taking shape in the last years, although, of course, much remains to be fulfilled, concretized. I'm just going through very shortly. We can then discuss more in detail, but just to go through shortly, I think one fact that got little attention from trade analysts here or in Brazil is that in the last 5 years, bilateral trade has been increasing steadily, and India's exports to Brazil already amounted to $9 billion in 2022. India, meaning that India in last year sold more to Brazil than to Japan, than to France, to Italy, to Russia. Even more than to neighboring countries like Thailand and Nepal, for example. So this was really brought about by we have to say, not by active trade promotion activities from our governments. Of course, our governments, they have promoted trade, but I think we could say that was achieved by sheer business interest and opportunities for complementarity of interests. So from the Brazilian side, India is the 5th trade partner nowadays. So these are significant numbers, right? Another point is the stock of Indian FDIs in Brazil, at a conservative estimate, stands now at some 6 billion. Some people say this is much more, but I'm here taking a conservative stance, saying that this is, let's say, 6 billion. From Brazil to India, then I think the FDIs have still to take off. There are some important companies, Brazilian companies already present here, but there is not this critical mass of FDIs as we have of Indian FDIs in Brazil. Another going through also quickly, another very important point of our evolving partnership is biofuels. You know that Brazil, I think at some point in time, I think thanks perhaps to the work of my predecessor, Indian authorities became aware of and I can say without, in all frankness, of the very successful Brazilian experience with ethanol in terms of powering vehicles and in terms also of contributing to the energy mix of the country. I think it's 12% of our energy mix comes from ethanol. You know very well these numbers. I'm not so. I think it's around 12 or 13% in terms of energy mix, and in terms of participation in day-to-day transportations, I think it's more than 47%. Of our vehicles are powered by ethanol. So these quite important experiences were brought to India. And in the last 3 years, I think the Indian government got, I think, a concrete interest in getting to know this experience, even because there is this, I think, the policy to set, which has been here in India, has set a target of achieving 20% of mix ethanol in gasoline by 2025. So I think also this is the origin of the interest of knowing others' experiences. So there has been in the last 3 years very frequent technical and political meetings on finding ways of connecting our ethanol economy, so to speak, not focused on agriculture, focused on, for example, connecting value chains of automobile sector, value chains of ethanol productions, not really impacting the agricultural sphere. So this is one other area where you see the partnership gaining strength and diversifying. A third one, I would say, is defense. In the last years, there have been a number of high-level to middle-level missions from India to Brazil and from Brazil to India by high-level authorities of defense. The main objective being finding ways to connect the two defense industrial sectors of both countries in terms of trade and in terms of joint ventures. Just to give you an idea, an example, concrete one, in 2000, this year, there have been 4 high-level missions in the defense area. One from India to Brazil, the chief of the Indian Army was in Brazil, I think in April, and 3 high-level chief of the Army, chief of the Army staff, and chief of the Naval staff visited India, focusing on finding business connections and developing, first of all, cooperation between our defense industries. And earlier next year, these missions will go on. So there is a perception that there are complementarities to be taken advantage of. And another area, it's agriculture. Here, Brazilian agriculture or Brazilian agribusiness has been traditionally associated of exporting tons and millions of tons of commodities to all over the world. The point, I think, the take here when it comes to the Brazilian agribusiness, exporting to one of the largest, or perhaps one of the second largest or third largest, first largest, depending on the year, food producer of the world is India. So the idea is more of course, export products like soya oil, for example, but also establishing partnerships. Just one example, which is, I think it's interesting and very recent. Last month, Indian and Brazilian companies in Uttar Pradesh concluded a memoranda of understanding in a number of areas, but convergent areas, in order to help increase the dairy productivity in India. Because, as you know, Brazilian cattle comes originally from India, and in Brazil, this cattle has gone through a genetic engineering, also because we have other races there, and the mix of the races has yielded an increase in milk productivity, very significant one. So these are examples which I would like just to single out. There are other examples. So, and what, just to conclude this part, what you see is that there is a clear political will, business interest in identifying new areas of cooperation, and we have seen as a concrete signs of that many G2G, G2B, B2B meetings. Again, a very quick example. Since I have arrived 4 months ago, after the G20 summit, I have received 5 high-level missions from Brazil, government/business delegations, most of them on an exploratory basis. 3 in the defense area, I have already mentioned. One, the Minister of Agriculture, and the other, the governor of our biggest agribusiness producer in Brazil, which is the state of Mato Grosso. So in sum, I think more than 130 businessmen followed these missions. So you see, there is people are betting on that. Now we are going to see in the years to come whether all these efforts will bear concrete fruits in terms of investments of trade. But at this point in time, it's where we are seeing a very concrete interest in from both sides to have more dense bilateral relations in economic, defense, energy, agriculture also. So this is where we are. And just in concluding that, we see, coming back to the political sphere, I think it's important to recall, especially in nowadays, taking into account the geopolitical background we are observing, it's that bonds of trust have always been a fundamental criterion for strengthening business ties, cooperation in science, technology, in defense, energy, etc. And this is even more so today. We are, as I have mentioned, geopolitical factors now are factored in when it comes to take big decisions regarding making investments, and then people talk about friendly shoring, home shoring, always taking into account new geopolitical realities. So in this context, I think Brazil and India should take advantage of their long-standing and very solid relations. I think we have a relation based on mutual trust, which I think both countries can take advantage of this long-standing and very friendly relations to engage in more cooperation and to try to seek complementarities which could help both countries to overcome their socio-economic challenges as developing countries. So I think that we are in a very good moment. In 3-4 year time, let's see what will be the results of this really intensive effort to connect more the two countries. Anyway, just changing here the subject, I think I gave a background of the prospects of this renewed strategic partnership. In a moment, Brazil received from India the gavel of the G20 presidency. So this brings me to the second part of my remarks. I hope I'm not taking too much time, and I'm trying to really summarize here. I think that it's fair enough to start these remarks here on the G20 with words of praise for India, because of the significant results I think India has achieved, and this I think it's a universal really consensus, and also especially taking into account the complex geopolitical background not only during the summit, but throughout the whole presidency. And let's see how this evolves under our presidency. So I have just selected, I think, three results which impact on our presidency in terms of continuity and in terms of paving the way for perhaps Brazil having less problems in negotiating a leaders summit, less complexity than India had. The first, I think it was, as I already mentioned, the issuance of a joint statement, which really did not shy away from mentioning the very hard issues. So I think there was a good part of the issues of the president, the leader's statement, which dealt with the hardest of issues. So I think this is, of course, it's a tremendous result. Another, I think, important point or result was mainstreaming the interests and challenges of the developing world in the agenda. And the third, I think, not the third in importance, last but not the least, the inclusion of the African Union as a permanent G20 member or permanent invited country to the G20 presidencies. I think this was a long-standing aspiration. Many big developing countries were supporting this aspiration. And on the basis of these three results, which I have selected, I think Brazilian presidency will be, to a fair extent, a presidency of continuity. Continuity in the drive to consolidate the interests and challenges of the developing world in the group's agenda. I think also continuity in the sense of carrying on the commitment to tirelessly seek consensus and to harmonize developed and developing countries' interests, which of course are not all the time coinciding, as we know, and also bearing in mind the importance of promoting peace and sustainability. I think there are the two for all humanity, in the sense that G20 can be a group who responds to the aspirations of all humanity, and this is an important point, I think, which was made by Indian presidency throughout the year. We assume the presidency convinced that G20 remains the global forum best place to engender, to find solutions to the challenges, the main challenges on the horizon, but of course always cognizant, and we always have been making this point, G20 is no substitute for multilateral organizations, because G20 has become so vast in terms of themes and of organisms, enormous number of working groups, not to mention all the ministerials, which are always part of the schedule. Then presidency after presidency, the number of groups and themes have been expanding. So giving the idea that G20 is becoming a multilateral institution. So we always make the point that this is no substitute for the multilateral organizations. And this is why we always saying that one of our priorities, I can go to the priorities 2 minutes. One of the priorities is the reform of the multilateral institutions of global governance. But before reaching that, in assuming the G20 presidency, and this has been also much, I think, emphasized, we are focusing on a number of pressing challenges of the world, taking into account that we live in a moment of sometimes called a polycrisis moment, and there are some terminologies here used to express the number of very important or grave issues defying solutions, which are challenging the countries to find solutions. So just going through, of course, persistent hunger and poverty, armed conflicts with catastrophic humanitarian consequences, high volatility in the food and energy prices, stubborn inflation causing widespread setbacks in living standards, interest rates staying higher for longer, so triggering debt vulnerabilities throughout the world. Of course, climate crisis, that it's no longer something as a distant threat, now having become more of a present reality in terms of all the meteorological events we have been witnessing, and also because scientists are saying that the clock is ticking, and the situation is more serious than they had anticipated, for example, back in 2015. So are they making this point? In 2015, the perception of this scientific community was not the perception nowadays in terms of the gravity of the threat. So, but now the question is that all these crises affect all of us, all countries, but they affect the countries not equally, and frequently developing countries and their populations bear the brunt of this crisis, and the distributional effects of all of these crises, as well as the proposed solutions to them, should not be played down, should be not considered a secondary problem. The question that who is paying the price, who will be poised to be the biggest player, or what countries are poised to be the biggest players in the new green economy. So this kind of debate, I think we should also bring to the forefront. And President Lula has been very vocal about this. He has been arguing and to a large, considerable extent, connecting to his own life experience, that he has been saying that if he had to summarize the current global challenges in a single word, it would be inequality. Inequality is being both the root cause of several of the crises and we are facing, and also the inequality as a frequent factor contributing to the aggravation of the crises. So this is why Brazil will mainstream the question of inequality in the G20 agenda. In this context, let me just go through our IO priorities in a way which has been systematized by my authorities. First, the motto of the presidency is building a just world and a sustainable planet. The priorities proposed by the Brazilian presidency are three: social inclusion and the fight against hunger and poverty, energy transition and the promotion of sustainable development in all its three components: economic, social, and environmental, and reform, as I have already mentioned, reform of global governance institutions. And the priorities for each of the work streams in the Sherpa and finance tracks will derive from these three overarching goals. And to address those priorities, the Brazilian presidency will propose the creation of 2 task forces, the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty and the Global Mobilization to Address Climate Change. And also there's going to be a focus on concrete implementation of decisions. So this is why Brazilian presidencies will promote a further integration between the financial track and the political track of the discussions in order to ensure that the ideas, the decisions, the perceptions discussed on the political track can be concretized or implemented by concrete plans by the scientific, by the financial track. So just in concluding, next week we are going to have the first Sherpa meeting of our presidency, followed by the financial track ministerial meeting, which is something different because the financial meetings, ministerial meetings will take place later in the presidency throughout the year. And also there's going to be at some point in time next week, a joint meeting of the political track and the financial track in order to try to coordinate more the decisions taken by one track with the decisions or the ideas proposed by the other track. So thank you very much. This is one of our initial remarks.
Thank you, Excellency. I think this was wonderful to get a sense of both India-Brazil relationship as well as the priorities of Brazilian G20 presidency. I think one can see various complementarities. I think a lot of the themes are building on to Indian presidency, but I think that some ideas are very, very uniquely Brazilian, which is I think some ways to be expected. Before I open this up, I thought if I can ask you a few areas to expand upon. Of course. Given that Prime Minister Lula had been part of the public space for a very long time. Even in the past, his presidency of Brazil was, has been quite remarkable for some of the achievements that he has had. I was wondering if you can give this audience a sense of what is the foreign policy vision he has for Brazil, given that we are passing through. As I think you mentioned in some of your remarks, an unprecedented geopolitical flux. There is this, the multilateralism is in crisis today, unlike we have seen in the past. You emphasize the point about how multilateralism remains at the heart of Brazilian foreign policy. But I was wondering, in terms of navigating some of these challenges, like great power contestation, US-China contestation is sharper today than it was the last time President Lula was in office. Multilateralism and the crisis there is much sharper than it was the last time that he was in office. So in terms of his worldview, in terms of his foreign policy priorities, where do you see them moving, and what is the kind of expectation that Brazil's partners should have with this presidency of Mr. Lula?
Well, just starting Brazil in Lula, Brazilian diplomacy or Brazilian foreign policy under Lula has its distinctive characteristics, about which I will, in a moment I will comment, but it's part of a longer diplomatic tradition. Lula built or defined his foreign policy building on a historic tradition. Perhaps for India, which is a very old civilization, when we talk about historic 100 to 100 years, it's peanuts. But for us, 200 years, it's our history as an independent country. And basically, it's a country who has made and reinforced some basic decisions regarding how to conduct foreign policy. The first one being a peaceful resolution of disputes. I'm not just talking about big principles. I'm talking about the realities. Brazil, as we recall, negotiated all his border issues with other South American countries by peaceful means, never resorted to war. And so this was a decision, because in some cases, I think the military option was an option in some cases in Brazil. But there was this option of not doing this by the Brazilian elite, governing elite, and this another important moment in history where that was reinforced was when we promulgated after the end of the dictatorship, when a new constitution was promulgated, and there was the option of not developing arms of mass destruction. As you know, Brazil by the early 80s had developed technology to build to nuclear weapons. We had this capability. We were quite advanced in already doing the first tests. And at that point in time, there was a decision of not going on with this. So there was this very historic and very important decision of having the technology to develop arms of mass destruction and not developing. Of course, it also reflected our geopolitical environment of more than 100 years of peace, right? And so these were decisions which more conditioned Brazil's foreign policy, and Lula builds on that. I think one of the distinctive characteristics of Lula is reinforcing not only the adherence to international law, but the idea that Brazil, as I have mentioned in my presentation, I think it's the same, I would say, venture to say with India, Brazil does not define its foreign policy and its foreign stances based relating to issues, problems, and interests of the big countries. In the sense that if big important powers are waging war, it doesn't mean that we should define our foreign policy in terms that if we are for and against one side or the other. So this is, I think that has been reinforced by Lula, not only having in mind the recent events, but before. I think this is and the other point was what I also mentioned, the so-called policy space. I myself, in the 2000, I was a Brazilian delegate in WTO. Basically, one of our basic instructions was guarantee policy space for Brazil when you negotiate WTO rules. I'm having in mind here nowadays this is history, but at that time when you were in the in the Doha round negotiating expansion or not of the coverage of the subsidies agreement of WTO, that was really serious in the sense that this could have consequences in terms of the country being taken to the dispute settlement and etc. So this is another very distinctive element of his foreign policy space. Not really engaging in siding with the big powers when they are waging their wars, so to speak, or having their problems. This is a second point. And the third point is Latin America, which is as a first priority. These are our neighbors. we have to seek economic and social and political, cultural integration with our neighbors, having in mind that Brazil is the sole country in South America which speaks Portuguese. We come from another Latin root, but another root. So the idea of trying to bond with our neighbors economically, socially. Mercosur is the best example of that. Mercosur under Lula expanded to Venezuela, and then Venezuela was suspended because of the democratic clause. Bolivia was also invited. I think will become shortly a member now after years. And Chile chose not to join the Mercosur because foreign trade policy priorities were other priorities, but they have a free trade agreement with Mercosur. So this is another priority. And the fourth priority is Africa. And Africa in two dimensions. We could talk about more dimensions, but let's stick to two or three. The first is that one of the one priority when it comes to the Atlantic and Africa is that South Atlantic should remain a region free of arms, especially arms of mass destruction, but demilitarized region of the world. The second is to protect our maritime resources. We have enormous, I would say enormous because it's a very big exclusive economic zone, which has to be protected because there have been issues of exploitation of these resources by other countries. I don't know if government mandated that. I don't think so. It's more private enterprise seeing the opportunity of fishing, right, and doing research, and also combating criminality in Gulf of Guinea and in Western Africa. Which is for us, it's a security concern. This is defined in Lula's foreign policy as a security concern. Okay, and resuming more frequent or intense relations with Africa, especially West Africa. Because, as you know, 52% or more of our population have African roots. Now, Brazil is a mixed country. Sometimes people do not acknowledge that many Brazilians, which are not really look 100% Africans, they perceive themselves as African Brazilians because of their origins. Sometimes not because of their color, because of the mixing of the population. So these are I would say the basic ones. And in terms of with the great powers, this is the idea. We have strong trade relations, economic relations with the United States, with China, with the European Union. And we have been having these important trade relations with these three areas, and for more than 10 years or 15 years. And we have been successful in having these good economic relations. It does not mean that we are siding or supporting them in political fora, multilateral fora. Most of the time we are not. We are sometimes we support, partially, etc. But this is how things have been conducted.
Related to this on multilateralism, and you mentioned about, of course, G20 and BRICS and IPSA. I was just wondering if you can throw some light on what is this is an age where multilateralism is in crisis, and there is an attempt to build minilaterals, plurilaterals. BRICS itself is a plurilateral.
Right.
IPSA itself is a trilateral. And G20, one can also call it, as you said, it's not really a substitute for multilateralism. But given that the multilateral institutions are doing so badly and poorly, and that you have one of your strands of G20 also reforming multilateralism, India also proposed reform multilateralism. What avenues do you see for these plurilaterals? In particular, if you can elaborate on BRICS and IPSA, what sort of role do you see for them? And also how optimistic you are about multilateral reforms, because we know that the debate has been going on for a while, and the process has been quite slow and often limiting as well. So A, how optimistic you are about multilateral institutions, and B, about IPSA and BRICS. What do you see as future there?
Well, starting with IPSA and BRICS, because it's part of my professional experience, I was always challenged in Brazil. My authorities would send me, not only me, but among other diplomats, to discuss with academia and think tanks and with journalists, what is IPSA for? How useful is BRICS? And it was, for me, it was working inside, as an insider, working as a sous-sherpa, was obvious, but not for people not really taking part in these discussions. So I always had this challenge to say this is useful. And why this is easy? I think the first thing from the Brazilian point of view, it was always useful because Brazil is state institutions, agencies in IPSA and BRICS had the opportunity, which for us was not obvious. Perhaps countries who have a tradition of connecting to other countries, but we are traditionally more isolated country. The idea of getting to know state institutions of other important countries, how they work, how are the mentalities. For example, just to give you a very concrete example, in the early 2000s, when IPSA was 2003 or 2004 was launched, and there were, of course, foreign affairs meetings, but also meetings from other ministries. In the Ministry of Trade and Development of Brazil, a minority of officials spoke English, just Portuguese. So the idea of how isolated, even at that time, now you have translating machines, everything helps, right? But at that time, this meant isolation, not knowing, not connecting to important institutions of other countries. So it was very useful for Brazil in this respect, and also for participating in more than one group. Having the possibility of understanding that in each group you can derive some benefit, you can build some measure of consensus, and you can also in this exercise of comparison of being here, how you deal with all these countries and how this helps building blocks, not replacing the big institutions. So I think that even in BRICS, where sometimes striking deals, even the old BRICS, I'm not talking about the new BRICS, was challenging because where there are different positions really regarding Security Council, terrorism, just to name a few, Middle East, but even so, there was this sense that among all participants that was useful, because some kind of idea on what we can agree, what we cannot agree, was clear, and this helped in the so-called building blocks when these discussions were held in multilateral fora. So I like these groups. I think they are really useful.
Thank you, Ambassador. Let me
Yes.
open this up
Yes.
for the audience,
Yes.
for their questions, comments, observations, please.
Question is followed by a historical context. You mentioned some of the important factors of the multilateral partnership. My question is, what are the possible challenges that you could think of? And the context is, so in one of the important factors, you mentioned agriculture, and historically, Brazil filed a complaint at the World Trade Organization against New Delhi's subsidies of the sugarcane farmers. And since Brazil is the largest exporter of sugar, it claims that Indian subsidies are sort of inconsistent with the global trade rules.
Yeah.
So so the context is the sugarcane subsidies. So what comment do you have on that?
Okay.
And what are the possible challenges of the multilateral partnership that you could possibly think of?
Okay.
Ambassador, my first question is regarding your remarks on the G20 priorities for Brazil. So you mentioned that sustainable planet and environment, one of the priorities of Brazil for G20, just like India also had sustainable planet and environment. But if you see, both India and Brazil are very ecologically rich and have a huge forest cover. But sometimes that forest cover becomes a major roadblock when it comes to implementing connectivity and physical infrastructure projects like Brazil is facing in the Amazon region. In 2021, you had the plan of the Pan-Amazon Railways project, which is facing huge delays because of the environmental concerns. And India faces similar concerns when we implement our connectivity projects in Himalayas and the densely forested regions of the Northeast. So how can India and Brazil walk the thin line between sustainability and development at the same time? And second question is related to the comment on peaceful South Atlantic. Do you think that the revival of the Falkland Island issue can be a zone of conflict when it comes to maintaining sustainable peace in the South Atlantic region? Thank you.
So I think there are too many questions there, and I'll let the ambassador answer. But ambassador, since Falklands was mentioned and Malvinas, you have a new president in Argentina, and it would be very interesting to hear what do you think of that worldview and where he's coming from and the changes that he wants to usher in Argentina, which will have an impact on the region and Brazil. Do you see that as a challenge, or do you see it something that you can work with?
Okay. So let's start. Regarding the dispute settlement issue of the sugar in factually, this was the case brought by Brazil to the dispute settlement. The idea was that, in our view, India was breaching multilateral trade policy laws, namely the agriculture agreement and subsidies agreement of the WTO. We won that case, but we have to have in mind one thing in the WTO. WTO has a dispute settlement, but the origin of WTO and the dispute settlement is a diplomatic origin. So when you even if you read the agreement, the dispute settlement agreement, you see always that throughout the whole dispute process, there is the option of interrupting the process and reaching diplomatic agreement. Because the origin of the trade policy system is a diplomatic one and favors agreement first of all. The dispute settlement decision is conceptually speaking, as a last resort. In this context, Brazil took the political decision of talking to India after the case was ended to say, let's find a way. This is a political decision. Again, it takes a political decision to do this. Let's find a way to solve this together, making, as you say in Portuguese, I don't know if you say this in English, making a lemonade out of a lemon. So what was the idea? Was establishing ethanol partnership, in the sense that it would help contain, it would influence the price of sugar, of course, if you use part of the production for ethanol, and it can help. Coping with the challenge of decarbonization, of also contribute to a certain extent to energy security. So there was this political decision of let's go for an agreement. Let's not go for a dispute. This is where we are. So we don't see this nowadays as a concrete challenge for our coordination in multilateral forum for this reason, because we decided not to quarrel. Full stop. The second, it's sustainable development. Oh yes, the idea of how do you build infrastructure and with all the environmental concerns which shouldn't be taken into account. In Brazil, this is a big issue. First, you have mentioned the thin line. It is a thin line. In the case of Brazil, we have there was an option, societal option, for having a strong environmental agency at the expense of efficiency, I would say. This is my opinion. This is a government opinion we're just discussing here. There was a loss of efficiency in terms of having these infrastructure projects ready. And it was in the case of the dams, there was a loss of efficiency because the environmental agency prohibited large reservoirs of water. So if you don't have the large reservoirs as you have in the Foz do Iguaçu in the southern Brazil, this big dam, you have less energy security if there is no rain. So there was this decision. And I don't have an answer for you. What we think in the case of Brazil is that now that scientists have clearly reached consensus on the fact that the Amazon forest is key to maintaining water resources in Brazil. Because there is this, what they call the flying river, in the sense that the evaporation provokes these rains, which are so important for our agribusiness. So the idea of preserving the Amazon, giving not only out of ethical reasons, environmental reasons, you name it, also of economic reasons. And in the case of Brazil, there are other options, which is solar and wind energy, because the northeast coast of Brazil is one of the most windy in the world. So you have less intermittence of production. So there are other solutions, but this is a problem. But we are at a point in a moment where this problem in Brazil concerns the northern part of Brazil and concerns the Amazon region. And this is why we are trying to really be very respectful of the environmental agencies. But I don't know if this is applicable to India, because this is another world, another country, other also geopolitical realities which we do not face. Okay. And the third one, a peaceful zone. I would say I wouldn't say that the Malvinas, because Brazil calls these islands Malvinas, not Falklands. We call Malvinas. I don't think this could evolve into a major conflict, which would really jeopardize the idea of maintaining the South Atlantic a peaceful zone. So we don't see this as a threat to this bigger project. This is my answer. Regarding Milei, well, we have seen during the campaign Milei as a candidate having sometimes harsh words for Brazil. Let's face it. Also questioning, challenging the usefulness of Mercosur. After the election, we have seen, also because when forming his government, the government will be a coalition. Yes, he has have to form a coalition, not in the parliamentarian, it's a presidential system. It's not a parliamentary system, but still, there are other types of coalitions. But we have coalitions there. So, and what you have seen is that there is a clear will in the political discourse to go on with the historic relations with Brazil. We don't have to agree on everything, but the idea, for example, of leaving Mercosur, we are not convinced that this idea or proposal will prosper, even because we have just heard that President-elect Milei was favoring the signing of the Mercosur-EU agreement, which could take place in the near future. So I think that it's too early to evaluate that. But it's a government which has another ideological base and other perceptions when compared to our government. This is a fact. But it doesn't mean that you cannot work together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, Ambassador, it is often said, you campaign in poetry, you govern in prose. So,
This is a good saying.
So I think he will govern. I mean, that's the expectation, of course.
Yes.
But yes, we have how many hands I have to? Okay, so let's take people from here first, and then we'll come to this side. So Kalpit, all the way.
Your Excellency. Yeah, Your Excellency, my question is regarding, President Lula had proposed the BRICS currency a few months ago. With the Brazilian elite, political elite playing a very big role in institutions like the New Development Bank, how do you kind of push this concept further?
Can we take a few questions?
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Excellency, good afternoon, and my compliments on such a comprehensive presentation.
Thank you.
I'm Amit Gupta, and during the visit of Honorable President Lula in September in New Delhi, he mentioned about his support to Global South, the voice of Global South. So under Brazilian presidency, do you foresee any specific plans or any working group on promoting enhancing the voice of Global South? Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir. So my question is, as Brazil takes on the G20 presidency...
Also introduce yourself.
Sorry. My name is Nadia. I'm from Amity Institute of International Studies. There's a conflict brewing between Venezuela and Guyana. What kind of impact would that have on Brazil's foreign policy calculations? And also, second question, Brazil's been dealing with drought that has led to supply chain disruptions in the North Province, and Santa Catarina has been dealing with floods. With G20 presidency, what kind of experiences Brazil brings to the table when dealing with climate crisis and mobilizing a world consensus on climate change? Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, Excellency. Myself, Parth V. I'm also from Amity Institute of International Studies. I have a question regarding, as you mentioned, that priority of Brazil is Latin America and the Western Africa. And China is having strong influence and dominance, and it's evolving in Latin America and Western Africa both. And we can see in China's own neighborhood how it's dominating and influencing in South China Sea. And what do you think, and what's Brazil's stance? And it can impact Brazil's own national interest and foreign policy, and can obstruct Brazil's aim of demilitarized South Atlantic Ocean. So does Brazil see...
Get your last sentence. Sorry, your last sentence. Your last sentence.
I'm asking that it can impact Brazil's own national interest, and the China's decisions and activities can obstruct Brazil's aim of demilitarized South Atlantic. So what does Brazil sees and China as a competitor or as a partner on this?
think there's enough on your plate.
Okay. Regarding BRICS currency, I think that was an idea as an aspirational goal, in the sense that BRICS countries, brings together important countries, even more so now with the expanded BRICS. So the idea was to explore possibilities of having trade not relying on US dollar or euro. But as an aspirational goal, not as a project as a project which would be the creation, for example, of a BRICS currency. I don't think this should be interpreted this way. It's more as an aspirational goal. Okay. Regarding the global South, well, Brazil, to my knowledge, Brazil is not planning to call a large global South meeting as India did twice in its presidency. But we are we will conduct outreach exercises with developing countries of our region and also of Africa. And so perhaps this will evolve. I'm answering to the best of my knowledge. What I know is that there's going to meetings with Latin American developing countries are planned in terms of outreach, and also with some African countries. The idea being, I think, basically the same, of sounding what are the challenges, the interests, the priorities, in order to bring to the table of the G20 developing country interests. But we should see how this will evolve if Brazil will invite countries from other regions. I'm not, I don't know really. Regarding Venezuela, Guyana, we have to see. It's too early. Let me just contextualize. For South America, this is, as you say in French, du jamais vu. We have never seen that, in the sense of a continent where the last big waged war was in the 19th century. And there were some wars, small wars, which we could call skirmishes throughout the 20th century between Ecuador and Peru, Paraguay and Bolivia, if I'm not mistaken. I think the two come to my mind. And both were these 20th century small wars, so to speak, or skirmishes, were very quickly solved. The last one being Ecuador and Peru in 1995-6. So the idea of having a war in South America to solve a problem, it's something people are not really still believing that this can happen there. And we have seen a referendum in Venezuela, but we have not seen this translated into a foreign policy decision. And also, then this is now I'm talking on a personally. I'm not following in Chancery this issue, so I'm just sharing with you some personal thoughts. First, I think the historical context makes us not really convinced that this war will take place. I hope we are right. The second is the border between these two countries are in the Amazon region, covered by very dense Amazon forest. Logistically, how this could take place? I was just commenting. I don't know if anyone here has already been to the Amazon forest. The Amazon forest when you enter the untouched Amazon forest, is extremely dark. The trees meet, extremely dark, extremely loud because of the animals, and extremely dense. How can an army move through the Amazon forest? This is a logistic question, challenge. So it takes a lot of resources to conduct war there. So, but this is just a personal comment. So we are still not really believing that this will take place. But Brazilian government has already made declarations regarding the need to talk, not really to engage in the war of words to start with. So this is where we are. Okay. China, regarding China, as I have mentioned, we have very good relations with China in the sense that we don't have historical issues with China. Our contact with China is basically a trade and investment ties. And we are not really multilateral fora, as I mentioned, also defining our positions with relation to the issues China has with the United States, for example. And we are not really linking our trade and economic ties with political issues. So this has been going on. The fact that, of course, you have huge Chinese investments in many parts of South America has not really affected us in the political sense. Of course, when you have more of Chinese companies in Argentina, they are competing with our products. This is a fact, and this has been happening since the early 2000s. So, of course, Brazil lost space, market share in Argentina because of Chinese competition. No doubt about this. But this hasn't taken place in the trade field. This has not become a political issue. Okay, what has this, of course, has influenced how trade within Mercosur happens. This is a fact. But also there are rules of origin. Of course. The impact also has to do with, is limited by rules of origin. Okay? And regarding the South Atlantic, well, up to this point, we haven't seen a military presence, Chinese military presence in the South Atlantic. We have not seen that. So I'm not elaborate on that because this is not happening. Okay.
Okay, so I think we are running out of time. We have just last round of questions left. So I think there are 4 people. Okay, so go ahead.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for a very comprehensive, very informative talk. My name is Antara, and I am a China fellow working in ORF. So my question to you is about BRICS and expanded BRICS. Among the original BRICS members, there already existed a lot of contradictions, which actually hasn't subsided with time but intensified. I'm here talking about differences between India and China. Now BRICS have been expanded and there are new members, and even the new members have quite a lot of contradiction among each other. So by expanding BRICS, has it been strengthened or has it been weakened? So that's my question to you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Excellence. I am Danny Antonio Martin. I'm from Amity Institute of International Studies. My question to you is about you mentioned ethanol as biofuel, and you talked about the second generation production of ethanol in the sense of lignocellulose. And India has a huge biomass of unused lignocellulose in India. So my question would be, what would be the further agricultural ties that we could see in between Brazil and India in the sense of using biofuel and lignocellulose as a mode of making ethanol. And also you had talked about genetic engineering in the sense that dairy production of what is the field in which we India and Brazil could in the sense that in dairy production and agriculture, what are the existing prospects, and what are your views on this issue?
Ambassador, I'm Deepak Kumar Sharma, a student at University of Delhi. So my question is regarding the UNSC reforms. So Brazil being a G4 nation, we have been advocating for UNSC reforms for a very long time. But while several rounds of discussion have been held, but no concrete step has been taken for the reforms. So what do you think is the way forward?
Good evening, His Excellency. I am Akriti Mathur and I am a student of Amity Institute of International Studies. You had mentioned about the FDIs from India to Brazil and also from FDIs from Brazil to India. So my question to you is, what are the hindrances for Brazilian FDIs in India, and how can that be approached to build better economic ties between India and Brazil? Thank you.
Okay, so starting with BRICS, right? I'm starting with a sentence, which my point is not to evade your question, but that was the answer my vice minister when I became BRICS Sous-Sherpa, not Sherpa, Sous-Sherpa. And what is BRICS? And he says, my dear, BRICS is what it is. This was his answer. What was why this answer? He said the point he was making is that at that time, and I think it could be I think perhaps it cannot be applied to these present times. There was this decision, political decision, of these countries getting together and trying to create a group of discussion where some common interests could be found. Throughout the discussion, revealed. And at that time, the main thrust of BRICS coordination was financial. In the World Bank, in the IMF, in terms of making these institutions more responsive to big emerging countries. Having these institutions which were established after the war reflected in their governance the political situation of the post-war period, and this was no longer the case. So this was one of the coordination, important coordination aspect of BRICS. The other was the establishment of the new development bank. So at that time, how BRICS discussions looked like. When we would discuss on that, a lot of very easy to hammer out an agreement and agree on text. When we reached the paragraph on terrorism, on Middle East, so on, huge fight. And hours and hours and hours to find a common language, because we had the instruction from our political masters to have a language. Because at the end of the day was, we think BRICS is useful as a group for more than one reason. We are big emerging countries. We want to find a common ground because we have also some issues with the developed world, each country having different issues, so to speak. So let's stick together and agree not to agree. So this was how BRICS kept together. And I lived through many difficult moments when I think, what's going to happen now? We are fighting hours and hours. And then we had this instruction, political masters talked to each other, say, okay, understood, let's find a way to paper over here our differences in the text because we need to have a text, and had to move to the next. So this was, and I think that this could, I hope that this will go on, this spirit in this expanded BRICS, because there is value in having these groups. So this is, I don't know if I have answered your question, but basically these are my thoughts. Regarding biofuel, what we need, and this is to deepen what has already been going on in the last years. Very, very dense and continuous discussions between technical people, how to and between business people, how to viabilize this partnership. For example, establishing cellulose ethanol plant from Brazil in India. This has to do with finding complementarity and opportunity for both sides to do good business. But I think that the political will is there, and the potential is there. So I think this is a technical issue which has to be deepened, because it's a matter. It involves logistics to transport the cellulosic material. It involves technology, costs. So this, I think, can be, given that there is a political decision to go forward, I think it has to do with technical discussions. But again, not thinking that this is the solution to energy transition. It's a part of the solution. Okay? The other one is dairy production. I think somebody. Yes, dairy production. What's the point? In a few words, Brazilian cattle, the large majority of Brazilian cattle originally comes from India. In Brazil, this cattle was subject to another environment, also to genetic engineering, to other conditions in terms of food. And also was mixed with other European races to some extent. And the result, the concrete result, taking into account technology, environment, etc., is that the milk production of the main Brazilian producers of milk of Indian origin cattle is sometimes 6 or 7 times higher than in India. And so the idea of the Brazilian side is that our intention is not to export milk to India. Our intention is to export technology, to close joint ventures where India will acquire this technology, and Brazil will establish a technological partnership. In other words, we are going to earn money in another way, not selling the milk, but through joint ventures in various areas of technology, food, genetic engineering, managing the cattle in its environment. So these things which are being done as we speak. As I mentioned in Uttar Pradesh, I was in Uttar Pradesh when this agreement was. These agreements were concluded. Then the other potential poses. Somebody asked about agriculture partnership, right?
It was part of the same.
Yes. Definitely poses. Poses is one of the big potential, and in the case of India exporting foods to Brazil. So what are the stumbling blocks here? It's the sanitary authorities of both countries talk to each other and authorize the exports.
Just final two. One was on UNSC. If you have any, are you optimistic about?
No, I think that this you have to take a historical view. I think we cannot withdraw such claim. We can maintain our resolve, but of course, the geopolitical background we are living these days do not allow us to be optimistic in the short term. But I think that we should insist on that, because even because it's not only because it's our interest, because it's rational. How you can the G20 is already the fact that G20 has become so important is already a sign that the multilateral institutions are not working. So many countries wanting to join BRICS. Why? Because they need options, right? I think. And then FDI. FDIs. Indian FDIs to Brazil, they are concentrated in pharmaceuticals, TI, auto parts, Mahindra, an automobile sector. These are the main Sterlite is there in products of infrastructure. We don't see, from our point of view of Brazilian, I think that we have been attracting Indian investment, I think in good, given that, of course, we are competing with the rest of the world. I think the results are not bad, but I have to say that Brazil has to do, frankly, its homework, in the sense that having in place regulations that would make Brazil a more attractive export platform to the region. Because we have been now almost completing our big tax reform. You had years ago a tax reform, a big tax reform here. So which lasted was object of debate many years. It's the same in Brazil. We have been debating this for more than 25 years, and it seems that it's going to be approved in December. And Brazil will become a more attractive export platform. I'm not going to enter into details, fiscal details, but so in answering your question, for Brazil to be more attractive and attract more FDIs from India, it's also a question of Brazil doing its homework, make more attractive. Because we are a big market.
Thank you, Ambassador, for being very patient with us, and almost we have run out of time, and more time than we thought you would be with us. So that's wonderful to have you answer so patiently all the questions and to give us an overview. So let's thank the Excellency for his wonderful engagement with us. Thank you, sir. Thank you.